Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rush Hour podcast. So excited today to talk to a host of the new Evangelicals podcast. It's Tim Whitaker. How are you?
I'm great, Dave. Thanks for having me. It really means a lot.
Yeah, so I saw a clip of yours on an Instagram called the Tennessee Holler.
hmm
And I moved to Tennessee this year, and there's a lot of evangelicals around here. I'm from New England. We were raised Catholic. It's a little bit of a different lifestyle. Tell me about your podcast, The New Evangelicals. You call it a Jesus-centered community.
Yeah, so I grew up on the East Coast, New Jersey. That's where I live now, just so we have context here. And I grew up in a very conservative Christian environment. I was homeschooled for most of my life. I went to a small private school where I graduated top 5 in my class out of 6. So props to me for doing that. And I grew up really in that bubble, but I also, as many people who in your audience who might be able to relate to, I made a profession of faith very early that I was going to be a Jesus follower for the rest of my life. And to this day, that's what I'm trying to do, including when that led me away from the current expression of conservative Christianity that I found myself in for so long. So the podcast actually is much bigger. The New Evangelicals is actually a nonprofit organization, and we're a digital first space. So we have a digital community of about 10,000 people in a Facebook group. We do podcasting, we do YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all kinds of content, really helping people do 3 things. We hold space for folks who have been hurt or marginalized by the evangelical church. We advocate for accountability inside of the church, especially when they go bonkers and do abusive things. And we help people explore a better path forward in their faith that is kind of away from this fundamentalist view of Christianity, because it might shock a lot of people to know, Dave, that Christianity is much bigger than the American expression that dominates our political and civic discourse. It's actually much more beautiful and rich and robust. It's much more focused on loving all of our neighbors. So we help people understand that, hey, you can definitely leave faith if you want. There's no shame in that at all. But there's plenty of reasons to stay Christian that help you advocate for all of the rights of all of your neighbors, not just the conservative Christian ones.
Yeah, no, it's so. I always love talking because if I criticize the church, people will come after me and call me all these names, and I don't even know what I'd refer to myself as. I'm not really a practicing Catholic, but I think I do good with my community.
Hmm.
But I always love to look at what Jesus would have actually done versus what's going on in today's world, right? I don't know biblical quotes, but wasn't he down to flip tables when people were using his dad's name to sell merch? I mean, like, what world do we live in where we've got a president elect that's got his own Bible? Like, were you? What was the like big factor that led you to want to create this movement of yours to say we don't have to throw out religion, we just have to throw out these toxic ideas?
Well, I'll try and be very concise here because, like anyone's story, there's a lot of layers to it. Essentially, it started off by death by 1,000 paper cuts. You always kind of have questions when you're brought up this way. You're always wondering different things about what you're taught. Does everyone who doesn't believe like me really go to hell forever? Why are we so mean to people who aren't like us, especially people who are gay, for example? I mean, I was a conservative Christian. I was raised on talk radio, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity. So certainly I held conservative politics, but I also, had questions as well about how the world functions that were kind of beyond my bubble. I would say though, in 2016, when Trump came on the scene, that was really the moment where the dam really broke open. Maybe I had little leaks kind of poking through, but when that happened, I said, wait a second, something is wrong. And here was the moment for me. And again, for those of you who grew up like me listening to this, you could probably relate in some way, shape, or form. There's a term in I'm using the term conservative Christianity, but really it's evangelicalism. There's a term in evangelicalism known as purity culture. It's this idea that you have to stay pure sexually before God until you get married. So, you're taught this at age 10, 11, 12, all through your teens. Men have to resist temptation to lust, and women have to stay pure until you find your partner. And then the sex is guaranteed to be great. There's a lot of bullshit in that, but I believed it and I did that. For the record, me and my partner saved ourselves for marriage by the skin of our teeth, but it was technically we were still virgins. And a lot of my upbringing in church was tied to my sexual purity. Hey, Tim, God really can't use you if you and your girlfriend aren't pure, or God can't use you if you're looking at pornography because that's a sin. So, I had pretty high standards even as a volunteer in my churches, as a musician, as a drummer at the time. When Trump comes on the scene, and those leaked Hollywood Access tapes come out where he's bragging about assaulting women, I thought to myself initially, oh, this is a shoo-in. Evangelicals are never going to go for this because I grew up in this world. I know how they treat sexuality. And when they said that we need a commander in chief, not a pastor in chief, and that this was locker room talk and that God can use anyone, I said, whoa, whoa, guys, you're telling me that I might have had my position as a volunteer jeopardized as a church kid because I kissed my girlfriend for too long because God's law is clear. But this dude should be in charge of the White House and of our country, even though he's bragging about assaulting women. That's when I knew that something wasn't right. And that was the initial first descent down many more that led me to really rethink, what do I believe about God, the Bible, how I love my neighbor, and why am I so at odds with my own faith tradition in the middle of that?
It's so interesting because my learning about purity culture was from sort of the outside looking in. I didn't ever see that, mainly because I'm raised as a guy. I think men are given less of the pressure that women are, as far as a lot of the purity rings and the photo shoots with the fathers, like that Southern
The
evangelical shit.
purity
Oh,
balls. Yeah.
I had to Google that to believe it.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking.
There's a member in the Bachelor Nation world, and that's the niche that I cover, Madison Pruitt. She
Mhm.
marries a billionaire, son of a billionaire, and that I've got my own issue with. But she creates this font on her veil that says "worth the wait," and her whole thing became waiting for marriage. Which again, it's like, fine, do whatever the heck you want.
Totally.
But she perpetuates a lot of those talking points, kind of like the "who wants to chew used gum"
Yep.
type of talking points, and you just look at it and you go, maybe it works, but also like we need to have these conversations about that not being your whole identity. She was like receiving praise from her husband, from her father on the show, for being like this like person who upheld this standard. And I just think like it's like, if you can hold that standard, great, but if not, fine. Like, but the shame that can come along with anything that could violate that standard, whether it be just being a teen, or through actions not your own, like assault. It really goes to show that, yeah, in the world we used to live in, if you shouted too loud, you lost the chance to be the president, right? These little gaffes that used to happen would be like career ending. And Trump kind of was the first person where people really had their blind kind of faith tested, and I think for the most part failed.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to white evangelicals and white Christians, I mean, we have all the data on this. So we know how they vote and how they voted over the past 3 election cycles. And shocker alert, it's in favor of Trump every single time, including the most recent one. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how Trump gained in minorities, and that's all true. But without the white Christian vote, Trump just still doesn't win. They are still by far the only reason why we have a Trump presidency going into 2025. And so, yes, you're completely correct about that. I mean, it's very weird, Dave, being taught your whole life that when the world tells you to move, you plant your feet and tell the world to move, a way of saying that you don't compromise who you are in your values. Only to watch so many of my evangelical friends, pastors, and neighbors say, "No, no, no, Tim, what are you doing? Not moving? Like Trump is the guy. He's going to save America." And so it's very jarring to grow up in a world where you're taught these standards. You actually end up holding to those standards, and then your church kicks you out because it landed you on the wrong side of the political aisle or debate. And by the way, to be clear, to let everyone know where I was in, was it 2020? No, sorry, 2016. I voted third party in 2016. I was not, oh, the Democrats are going to save America. I'm still not that way. I got a lot of beef with them, but I voted third party in 2016. And even then, I knew whatever this Trump thing was that was taking over the church was really dangerous and really problematic. And of course, since I've been doing this work now full time and studying it, and also going to a lot of these Christian nationalist events and meeting the people, my hunch was exactly right.
So you talk about sort of focusing on, there's cultural issues that you can focus on within being a follower of Jesus, right? I specifically look at my belief is that we should try to provide Medicare for all. And I think that's a basic belief that we should all be able to unite on. And with the recent shooting, while that's, I think, the wrong thing to do is to, murder a CEO, I do think it opens up this conversation where there may be people on the left and on the right. There may be Christians and atheists. We may all agree, hey, we should be taking care of each other. But for whatever reason, it seems as though like people within a church will take care with those people that are in the church, but that still gives you this border of us versus them. I don't think Jesus would have cared much about that border.
I mean, that's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Anyone who knows their Bible and knows their context knows how risque it was to tell the story to a bunch of Jewish people about the Good Samaritan. That didn't exist in his culture. It's like saying to Christian nationalists, the good undocumented immigrant. It would be just so scandalous that someone like that could do something good. Yeah, I mean, you're completely correct. I believe as a Christian, we have an obligation to love all of our neighbors and to do what Jesus tells us to do, which is heal the sick. And if we live in, the world's richest country, although of course we can argue how we got that wealth, but we have an obligation then to use those resources to cover our neighbor. And it is absolutely shocking to me. And this is not controversial for me, even from a long time ago. If we have the ability to do this, which we absolutely do, we absolutely can make it happen. Why are we letting our neighbors drown in medical debt? Makes absolutely no sense. It's actually, I would argue, unchristian to let billionaires and massive corporations profit off of the sickness and in some cases, what could be a death sentence in that process of for money. It makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like a psychology experiment about how people can turn a blind eye. How many people are going to make fun of the homeless in Los Angeles or New York, or basically in cities, which is where homeless people congregate to, because sometimes it's easier to be homeless that way. But how and then literally be able to I think part of the problem is we've almost made it so that everything's politicized, and so Christians maybe have felt the need to latch on to the conservative side, because the way I look at it, it was like probably 20 years ago when the first culture war issue I thought of, they came into my world, was this whole like Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays thing. It felt
Yes,
fabricated to me. It's like, say Merry Christmas, say Happy Holidays, I don't care. But I remember a cousin of mine going, Dave, it's Merry Christmas. And he said that to me like he was like a hard swear word. It's
that's right.
Merry Christmas. Do
That's
you
right.
remember how, like, were you around? I don't know how old you are, but were you around when that started, when that was the big talking point?
Oh yeah, look, I mean, man, I was in the world that helped create those talking points. I'm 36 years old. We have to understand here that the culture war stuff, saying Merry Christmas over Happy Holidays, abortion, LGBTQ plus rights, they all draw from a long legacy known as the moral majority. Jerry Falwell in the 80s started this stuff. I mean, this is not by accident. These things do not happen in a vacuum. There is a reason why white evangelicals don't, most of them believe that affordable healthcare is socialism. There's a right wing media ecosphere that absolutely is fueled by billionaires to promote these talking points to churches. And this is not new. There's a book by Kevin M. Cruz, a great historian, called One Nation Under God: How Corporate America essentially corporatized God and convinced people, including clergy back in the early 20th century, why capitalism was great. So there's a long legacy of how we got here. This is not new, but absolutely have I been a part of those things? Have I heard about those things? And they're absolutely ridiculous. But when you're taught your whole life, and this is true, this is not a lie to your audience. When you're taught your whole life that if you're a white Christian, the liberals want to throw you in prison and take your rights away because you love God and they hate God, you will do whatever you got to do and participate in whatever culture war you have to participate in order to maintain what you think you're just one step away from losing.
I totally understand that idea where you can become complicit with an ideology. I studied abroad in, I think, 2005. I'm 39, and it was at the height of sort of the Iraq War, where we were the only country that still believed we were there for the right reasons. And I remember being in France, being like, hey, no, USA, bro, we're saving you guys. Like, it was this idea, like
Yeah.
freedom fries. Like, I
Yep.
was I was not. I was just beginning to travel, so I had yet to have the humility of realizing, maybe not main character energy.
Yeah.
And there's this thought that exists with evangelicals that they're being persecuted. Are you being persecuted out there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not. I call this the American Christian persecution complex. Look, the reality is that Christians, in particular evangelicals, they have their own publishing industry, their own movie industry, their own music industry that oftentimes wins Grammys. They have church industries. They have church pastors making a lot of money off of this stuff. Most people in our government are Christian in one form or another. The Supreme Court routinely favors the side of religious freedom. And again, if you want sources on this, look up the book America Crusade by Andrew Seidel. I mean, all the data is there. I would argue that American Christians are the most privileged people, especially if you're white, to ever live in human existence. You have an entire country that is built essentially for you and to maintain what you think is, your right. And the problem is, whenever privilege is challenged, meaning whenever other people want access to the same privilege you have, that's always seen as a threat. So what makes Christian nationalism and this conservative evangelical Christianity so powerful is that they're so used to where they are and who's beneath them, that the second someone beneath them wants to come up to where they are, even if they have legal precedent, that's seen as an automatic challenge to their own status and privilege. And that's how the whole system works.
Yeah, I feel like it drives a lot of people away because it's so hard to have a nuanced conversation. One of the talking points I hear a lot if I, have a debate or a conversation around religion is, would you speak of Muslim culture this way? People will try to flip it around and like look like you aren't allowed to criticize other religions, but it's so popular to criticize Christianity. And it's like, well, Christianity is like the fabric of our country. It's what makes up the highest percentage of religion here. And there's a lot to criticize about it, but that doesn't mean you hate it. It's this idea, like, if I'm going to criticize my country, people say, well, you should move away. No, I'm a coach and this is my halftime speech. And I see something that's going wrong. And I do think faith can really help people, whether it's blind faith or faith in Christianity or faith in another God. I don't care. I personally don't care what God people pray to. I think the power of prayer and positive energy and just vibrational force is something that is like beyond what we can even cope with. And I don't care in which label people give that. But for you to, I guess, would you call it deconstructing Christianity? Do you consider, because it's a popular word I've had to learn about. We don't, let me tell you this, as a Catholic, we don't deconstruct anything in New England. It's like you show up for Easter and Christmas or you don't. Yeah. But in the South, it's like, or not just in the South, but in the evangelical culture, it seems as though you almost have to come out of that closet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure.
But deconstructing is just really criticizing and breaking down the bad ideas, right?
Yeah, I mean, the term deconstruction, it kind of popped up a few years ago online, became this big hubbub for a lot of reasons. And ultimately, the reality is deconstruction simply means to renegotiate one's core beliefs. I mean, if we had to really distill it down to some foundational ideals, but it's not a movement. People often call it a movement. It's not. It's an explosion. People are going in very different directions. Some people have the same background I do, and they, quote unquote, deconstruct or they renegotiate what they believe, and they leave faith altogether. Other people like me want to find a more truer expression of being faithful to the way of Jesus. So we actually go more Christian in many ways, right? So deconstruction is simply an explosion that describes this phenomena of people finding themselves online, finding other voices online that were asking the same questions, which, by the way, I was one of them asking these questions, only to find out that I wasn't alone. And then that really opened the door of what was possible in terms of what I believe about, really big things: life after death, salvation, the Bible, God, Jesus, how we love our neighbor. These are massive topics that a lot of people really started asking more deeply because they saw the direction of the church and went, wait a second, why is it tyranny to wear a mask during a pandemic that is killing our neighbors? Why is that a Christian value all of a sudden? That was me. I was still serving in my church. So I'm like, guys, wearing a mask just seems to be the bare minimum of what we should be trying to do during a global pandemic, right? So all these moments made us ask these questions, and then we found better answers and have since left that way of thinking behind. Many of us are still in the space critiquing it. I'm one of them. There are many others. Other people have left it all together and just, lived their life.
Yeah, and it's I see people as individuals, and are they doing good out there, and are they helping their community? I always see, like, I have my Catholic parents donate a lot to their church, and churches from the inside there is a lot of socialism that's going on. Everyone's donating a percentage and trying to help each other out. So it's not like the system can't work. It's just like, well, this is what our group is doing. And I think the inefficiencies that come with that is it's just more of like an us versus them mentality. But with deconstructing and with asking questions, not everybody in your family is going to be at the same sort of place, right? So like, what's that dynamic like with your family with regard to those conversations? Do you have those conversations about where you are with your faith?
Yeah, great question. This is a very common situation for a lot of people, both on a like nuclear family level and a micro or macro family level. So for me, in my situation, my partner and I both deconstructed. She's no longer a Christian at all. She would identify more as like agnostic, but also we have 2 kids under 4. So she's like, "Listen, Tim, you do what you want to do online. I'm just trying to raise the kids and like do what I got to do. Like my head is just not where yours is, and that's fine." So she doesn't really think about it anymore. My parents are amazing people. They raised me really well. I love them dearly. They're amazing grandparents to my kids. We don't talk about this stuff. It wouldn't be good for either of us. My approach has always been just showing them love and acceptance, hopefully being able to model that I'm open to conversation and to seeing things different. But other people are not so fortunate. I know many, many, many stories because people DM me all the time about parents who have cut off their kids or kids who can't see their parents at Christmas because one of them is out, and one of them is queer, and their parent it won't affirm who they are, won't call them by their pronoun or by their chosen name. So this is a very touchy topic because different people have different results.
You know, it's so interesting, the idea about the conversation of faith with your partner. It's your closest best friend. It's
Yeah.
the person you're most, each other's like closest secrets. Was there a moment where one of you came to the other first to initiate that conversation? Because you probably know these guys, Rhett and Link.
Oh yeah.
They're the big YouTubers who every year they give an hour-long update on their deconstructing, and I find it, like I said,
Oh.
fascinating from an outside looking in, just to hear them talk about how maybe like did you wonder if your relationship could withstand the reshuffling of where you saw your faith?
Oh, of course, because in this world, you're taught that the only thing that matters is that you're both Christian. Like the most important piece to you getting married, this is a purity culture thing and just a church culture thing, is that the person you're marrying is a Christian. And so you're taught early on that if as long as you both have your faith, your marriage will be secure. Now, this is a load of malarkey for a lot of reasons, okay? But when that's ingrained into you, and by the way, full no shame moment, but kind of shame now. We definitely did a foot washing ceremony at our wedding. I definitely washed my partner's feet and vice versa. I got pictures to prove it, Dave. So I really was. I got all of the marks
Yeah,
of a
you got the
typical
receipts for
evangelical.
sure, for
Got the
sure.
receipts, man. And so when my partner was like, or wife, whatever, I use the words interchangeably. Um, when she was like, "Hey, I'm not sure if being gay is a sin." I was like, well, like, listen, I get it. Like, people are really mean towards gay people, but like, the Bible is kind of clear. I'm not really sure, like, what we do with this stuff. And I could tell she was thinking differently. Yeah, in the beginning, for sure I was nervous because I thought, well, if she loses her faith, what's our marriage built on? But you know what the best thing about deconstructing is for me?
What's that?
It taught me something so key, and this could be applied to relationships and to the bigger sociological system that we find ourselves in. I learned a key thing. You can make room for people with different beliefs and you can still share the same values. My partner and I still share the same values of how we love our kids, how we love our neighbors, what we want to see in the world, how we communicate with one another. We share those same values, even if our beliefs that get us there are different. And that could be applied to society. What makes Christian nationalism so dangerous is not that it has its own belief structure. Who doesn't have that? It's that it believes it has to take over and rule from the top over everyone else's. So there's actually no ability for a Christian nationalist to reason with an atheist or a Muslim because in their mind, they have to be conquered. But we can find core shared values among different beliefs that get us there. So I think that was a huge learn for me. And as I went through with the process and as I started rethinking things, I thought to myself, why would I let our different beliefs about God or the Bible destroy a really healthy, beautiful marriage with someone that I deeply care about and love? And here we are now. We are going to hit 11 years together next month and 8 years married, 2 kids, and our marriage is stronger than ever.
That's amazing. That's good to hear. And yeah, I mean, I've got a 7-month old, and
Oh,
we
congrats. Are you sleeping?
Not much.
Yeah, okay.
And you know what? He's so cute when he cries that I don't even mind getting up.
I get it.
I'm so blessed to, like, be able to work from home, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
might hear him crying in the background, but he's a very pleasant boy. But we wonder, like, how are we gonna parent our kid that's
Mhm.
different from how we were parented? And I think our generation, elder millennials, I think we're the first generation that goes, "Huh, we can start Googling this shit."
Yeah.
And we read books, we learn all these things. What are some things you plan to do or are doing differently than how you were raised?
Oh, good question. Well, I'm listen. I have a 2 and 4 year old. I am not a parenting guru or expert, so we're kind of figuring it out. First off, I will tell you, it has given me more empathy for my parents. Right, knowing okay, you know what, they were doing the best with the information that they had, trying to raise us right. And I gotta say, for growing up in a very conservative, almost fundamentalist household, I had a really, really pleasant childhood. Like my parents are still amazing people. My dad's a great human. So is my mom. So we're very fortunate. I think a few things that I think about that I would do a little bit differently is I have no problem saying sorry to my kids. Sometimes I mess up. Sometimes daddy gets a little frustrated when the little guy isn't listening and maybe he snaps. We all have that moment of like, just do this thing. And being able to say that I'm sorry, I think is a big different approach than maybe how I was raised. I think the other thing too is giving our kids a foundation of a God that loves and accepts, not excludes and judges. Because the God I was introduced to very early on was one of if you don't pray this prayer, you're going to go to hell, and hell is a place where you're going to burn forever. And that's pretty intense when you're 7 or 8, or in some people's cases, as young as 4, being sat in front of a fireplace, being taught this is what hell is like. You're going to go there. That does something to your psyche. So I think for us, we want our kids to know, and listen, they can decide if God is real or not when they get older, and they can kind of think about it for themselves. But if we're going to give them any kind of religious framework, it's one of a God who loves people, loves them, and accepts them for who they are, and wants them to do the same thing for their neighbor.
Yeah, you mentioned, everyone's trying the best with the information they have. I probably say that line every day to somebody because you know how it is, you content creating, podcasting, you get comments from people that can be super mean.
Yeah.
"Well, the Bible says this," and I mean, what we've learned over the last election is a lot of times people will choose either their religion or their political identity over family, and it's hard to not take it personal. And maybe that's, part of the work of the four agreements is just to say,
Mm.
man, everyone's trying their best. Our parents were flying blind. They only had a book that told them what to do. We have a generation now where there's so many different techniques to raising kids. And yeah, like you, I mean, I'm barely just had a baby, so I have no idea what we're doing. We're just trying to, like, not have it choke to death. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no,
Like,
exactly,
literally,
exactly.
we're
Eat,
keeping
poop,
it.
and sleep, please.
Yeah, like, it's the joys of your baby pooping after they've had, a upset stomach. You're like,
Dude,
God,
for
thank
real. What a relief, right?
yeah, the other he just started eating solids, and, like, he had this, like, sweater outfit on, like this one piece sweater, and I picked him up because I could smell something, and I'm smelling at his knee, and I'm like, is there poop coming out of his knee? You don't even know until you're a parent the
Dude,
places it kind of congregates to
it is
as it leaves the body.
unreal. It's also unreal how when you're a parent, you don't mind changing diapers. Before I was a parent, I'm like, ew, who would do that? Now I'm like, I don't even think twice. Like la di da di da, like no problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. We have a thing now where, like, if it's really bad, I just take his clothes off, my clothes off. We go right into the shower. I got, like, a
Absolutely.
shower hose in the shower. It's
Do
like,
what
all
you
right,
gotta
honey,
do, man.
this is a stage 5 right now. We got a full blown mess.
We've
But
all
yeah,
had them.
no, and it's like, yeah, no, you do get a bond with your parents in a way when you become a parent that puts you on the same team, I should say. But what I have learned is a lot of times the more people you're exposed to, the higher chance you're going to meet people that think differently. For me, it was moving to New York City.
Yeah.
You cannot avoid, like, when you're on a subway train,
Yep.
you will see people of all socioeconomic levels, of different religion. You'll see the cab driver get out his rug to pray at whatever hour. You'll see all these different things. And it doesn't take too long to realize, okay, there's not just my way. So was that delayed for you because you were homeschooled, do you think? And at what point did you start to mix with other cultures?
I don't know if it was delayed from that necessarily. I mean, to be clear, like a lot of my churches were quote unquote ethnically diverse, although they were still very white in how they did things, right? So there's that. But I think I took a overseas missions trip to Europe for 3 months, Germany, Finland, and Belgium when I was 18. That was kind of the beginning of like, okay, people think about things differently, including religion and church and stuff. But I think I've always been, I'm not sure how it's been for you, Dave, but I've always been a naturally curious person. Naturally. I've always been someone kind of thinking like, well, how's the other side see it? I'll never forget. I grew up in construction. My dad had a painting business. I'll never forget, painting walls in someone's house and Rush Limbaugh. This is like 6 years into Obama's presidency overall. So he's like in his second term. Rush is just railing against President Obama. He's destroying the country. He's this, he's that. And I'm thinking with no prompt, but like we're all still here. Like obviously Obama has to be doing something right if like the country is still here and we're all functioning. I've just always kind of been a curious person. I don't know if homeschooling delayed that necessarily. I guess one could say that it did, but it was only a matter of time before, to your point, I live in New Jersey. It's one of the most diverse places in America. 8.5 million people in a very small area. All kinds of different, religious groups and ethnic groups are right here. So I'm always kind of been like used to that. But as far as the actual culture of different people or the beliefs of different people, that came later on in life.
It's actually funny because moving to New Jersey has been a goal of ours.
Oh,
It consistently ranks very high on the list of best states in the country, and it's not because it's got the lowest amount of taxes.
nope.
I ended up moving to Tennessee because it was a place where we could afford a home. But what I realized when I got here was the lack of state income tax, the lack of certain things here makes it one of the worst places to live in a way where there's going to be services to help you out. It's very individual, and I think that sort of rural viewpoint just comes from people living on their own farms, taking care of themselves, which can work in some ways, but not everyone. Like I was raised by a single mom, and she needed help, and she took that help, and it didn't. She didn't live off of it forever. She took the help that Jesus would have offered if he had seen my mom as a single mom who needed, and it just so happened that it was government food stamps and things like that. That was the help that she got. But you
Yeah.
can't always rely on Jesus. Might show up as government food stamps, right?
Listen, you're gonna get me ranting here, so I'll be quick. But one, I love New Jersey. I'm a huge fan of the state. I love it, all of it. My kids are covered underneath state health care until I make a lot more money than what I'm making now. I don't get a bill in the mail from my kids for healthcare. It's wonderful. Yes. Is all this talk about are we a Christian nation? You would think if we were, that there would be no poor people among us, that there'd be no unsheltered person among us, that we all have affordable health care. If people read, especially the red letters in some of the New Testament, I mean, listen, here's an obscure passage that most people don't know about. The book of James, chapter 5, the opening like 6 verses literally say, "Woe to you, rich business owners who exploit your workers for unfair profit. You are fattening yourself up like calves for the day of slaughter. Woe to you." Now, talk about some socialism, but I'm all about it. Like, yes, we should be taxing billionaires. Yes, we should be critiquing these people who are sucking up wages from the working class unfairly, while the working class is slaving away, sometimes quite literally, for pennies on the dollar of what their labor is worth. So you would think that Christian nationalism would be the most whatever they call as Marxism or socialist movement you could think of because of the teachings of Jesus. Instead, we have the opposite problem. These are people who love billionaires. They love having as many guns as possible. Many of them vote against giving kids, I don't know, free student lunches who are underprivileged. So it is absolutely shocking to me, although not so much anymore because I know where it comes from, but it's still shocking to me to watch my own faith tradition be on the wrong side of issues that if you just read the stinking Bible, especially the Gospels, you would see we have the opposite mandate to enact by Jesus.
I wonder if Jesus came back and he ran for office. I wonder what people would think of him. And I've always said I think Bernie Sanders is the closest thing we've had to Jesus in a while because he's been on the right side of a lot of marches for justice and for a long, long time. What would Jesus look like if he did run for office in today's world? Like, what platform do you think Jesus, as a follower of Jesus, what platform do you think he would want the American people to have?
Can I say something a little controversial?
Sure.
If Jesus was alive today and ran as a politician, Christian nationalists would want to crucify him.
Yeah,
Let's just call it what it is. Now, that being said, I want to be very clear to you and your audience. I am no Democratic sycophant. I was at the DNC this year. I have major problems with their
totally.
celebration of the military industrial complex. I have no problem saying that President Biden has continued to fund the genocide of the Palestinians. These are non-negotiables for me. I get that, okay? If Jesus was here today, I'm not even sure if he'd run under either one of those, platforms, frankly, for a lot of reasons. But I would think a few basic ideas I think that he would be in favor for based on his teachings. One, that we're more empathetic as a society. Two, that we love our enemies. Three, that we heal the sick. Four, that we clothe the naked. Five, that we liberate the oppressed. There's five things off the top of my head. Whatever that looks like, I would think Jesus would be in favor for. We should probably also add, considering in the Christian tradition, Jesus is the second part of the Trinity, aka God, he probably would be pretty pissed that we are pillaging and destroying his good creation that he made, and that our current global temperature is rising, causing, in some cases, catastrophic damage and killing people. So you probably would not be a big fan of big oil and big corporations that are just polluting the environment at unprecedented rates, and then telling us that if we don't use a paper straw, we're complicit. He probably would have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we talked about criticizing the church and sort of the pushback that comes from that, but you need to criticize the Democratic Party. And I think the way that people are now looking at things, to bring it back to this shooter, alleged
Yes.
shooter, Luigi,
Yeah.
is that what you're noticing is a populist movement comes from people that are left leaning and right leaning. And on the left, they call it progressive, but it really is this idea that there's a reason why people voted for Trump and AOC. There's a reason why
Yep.
people went from Bernie to Trump. Now, I think Trump's a fake populist, but he at least
Yep.
gives the idea that he's going to take care of the people. It just seems fraudulent to me.
Yes.
But at least we understand the framework there. So yeah, no, of course the Democratic Party, the corporate sponsors, the money in politics, the sort of the industrial complexes that fund everything, and the pharmaceutical lobbies and all of that. It's just it needs a complete overhaul. And I don't know if it has to happen from within the party or from without, but
Well,
it would be a lot easier if if Christians voted in a way that might have aligned maybe morally with some of these issues.
yeah, I mean, two things on this. Number one, if you're a Christian, your ultimate allegiance is to the way of Jesus. Okay. And that is a radical position for anyone. That means that you might be advocating for the person on death row not to be executed. That can be unpopular in all kinds of circles. Okay. There is the Jesus way is not easy. It oftentimes butts up against, the current of the world, especially in American culture when we're so built on greed and consumerism and materialism. Jesus has very strong statements about all those things. I mean, newsflash: the rich probably won't enter the kingdom, according to Jesus. I mean, let that sit on you how it does. I want to just comment briefly on the United Healthcare alleged shooter in that situation. This is another one of those, as someone who is committed to Jesus, I find myself in tension because we have a very strong policy as an organization, and me as a human, of non-dehumanization for anyone. Because the second you start dehumanizing someone is the second you're on a path towards violence. The reason why people can kill other people is because they dehumanize them in their minds. This person who was shot dead, what's his name? I think Brian
Yeah,
Brian
Brian
Thompson.
Thompson.
Yeah, this is both and for me. I absolutely abhor that a man shot him in the back, point blank, and killed him. I think it's terrible. I don't think violence solves the answer. It's like fighting fire with fire. You don't put out a fire by adding more fire to it. He has kids who no longer have a dad, etc. And also, at the same time, can we also recognize the system that Brian ran that killed thousands of people by denying them health insurance claims? Why does our current media society or media ecosphere really prioritize finding this guy, alleged Luigi, who shot this guy, which is bad, and he should be brought to justice? But why are they so silent on the thousands of claims that these corporations deny, especially considering that Brian, one of his big achievements was incorporating this AI model that denied claims up to a rate of 90%, according to a lawsuit that was filed. So it bothers me that, this person was killed, and I don't celebrate it at all. I never participated in the memes. I think it dehumanizes him. And also, why aren't we talking about the massive damage these for-profit health insurance companies cause people, putting them in medical debt, denying claims, causing all kinds of pain and suffering? We need a complete revamp of the medical system, period. And it starts by getting rid of these insurance companies or strongly reining them in.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I totally agree with you that like, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
Mhm.
It's just wild though that after how divisive the election was,
Yes.
it is the most divisive I've ever seen the country. This is actually unifying people. So as much as I agree with you that this shouldn't be the reason why, it just shows to you how big this problem has been with healthcare and
Right.
how much of a breaking point we've all been at, knowing most Americans can't afford a $400 medical emergency. So,
Exactly.
yeah, like you said, it's like I don't celebrate what happened, but I also don't blame people for how they're reacting, because it's like God knows everybody's trying their best, like you said, with the information they have, and people are fed up.
I completely understand because I'm fed up. I've been railing against American healthcare for years now. I hate getting surprise bills in the mail. And I agree. This is an apolitical thing. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw Ben Shapiro and right wing media try to really frame this as the crazy left killed this person. Ben got ratioed on YouTube by his own followers. I mean, crazy, right? So there is this populist movement. And can I just share a quick story, if you don't mind, Dave, about
Oh,
the
sure.
power of this?
Yeah.
So I do go to Christian nationalist events. One of them I go to every year is called America Fest. It's hosted by Turning Point USA. That's Charlie Kirk. There's about 14,000 people who attend. It's a pretty big event, and all the who's who of right-wing commentators are there. And I go every year to cover it. I know a lot of people in that space, and I believe in talking to them. There's someone that I talk to every year. I'm not going to say her name, but she's very right-wing. I mean, her posts are sometimes just really cringe, very transphobic, very the caricature of like a right-wing MAGA fanatic. And last year we were getting drinks because we actually get along on a personal level. And I said to her, I'll call her Jessica for sake of this example. I said, Jess, don't you agree that as a pro-family person, which by the way, I'm also pro-family, we should live in a country where there are not surprise medical bills coming in the mail, and that people shouldn't be burdened with unfair medical debt, and that people should have a right to access medical care. Like, isn't that a pro-family value to want our kids to be covered without worrying about if we change jobs, if we lose their doctor? I just leveled with her. And she said, yeah, I totally agree. I go, great, great. I will take that. Like, let's get it done. So I'm with you, Dave. I think that there are some issues that are not culture war issues that really can unite people to see, guys, I want my MAGA neighbor to have these rights too. I want all of my MAGA neighbors to have access to jobs that give them a livable wage so both parents aren't forced to work outside the home, putting their kids in daycare. I would love that. I want that to happen. So I do think on the economic side, especially given how the billionaire class has really grown their wealth and we're really all feeling the pressure, regardless of who we voted for, we can find some kind of common ground and say, the issue is what's going on up there. The issue is that Elon Musk, the world's richest man, is Trump's right-hand man. What kind of incentive does Elon have to take care of people like me or you or even the MAGA voter? He has none. He has all the incentive to maintain his wealth and power. So I think that we can really turn this on its heels over the next couple of years, just demonstrating these people don't care about you. We can do better.
And I think it's a very powerful place that you're in, because you haven't left the church or your faith. A lot of people will leave their faith and then they're written off. And I don't think you should be. I don't think they should be written off, but surely you shouldn't. And clearly, you've got a big audience. The podcast on Instagram is at the New Evangelicals, and of course, the New Evangelicals across the podcast spectrum. Were you surprised by the growth of your channel? Seems pretty big looking in. I mean, you're in the hundreds of thousands of followers now. Has this been a recent kind of growth, or has this been something you've seen for a while?
Dude, I started this thing on Instagram in December of 2020, late December, so almost 4 years ago now. Just with I just had questions. I have no college degree. I have no business acumen. I just had questions about my faith and all this stuff. And the account just blew up very quickly. And that's over time, that's what branched out into a podcast and into a Facebook community and into TikTok and nonstop content on YouTube and all this stuff. It's been like the wildest ride. I mean, I really am. I have no connections to anything public. I was a no-name church volunteer in New Jersey. I just had questions. And so it's been, it truly has been like the honor of my life and the privilege of my life to do this work and to be able to make a living doing it. We're structured as a nonprofit, so we're donation based. So to have people donate every month and, end of year, it's just been like unbelievable to kind of get this organization off the ground literally from nothing. There was not $1 of investor money in this or big money. It was just completely bootstrapped by people who believed in it. And me just saying, I got questions. I don't know what I'm doing. We'll just figure it out. So it's been a real journey.
Well, I've only stumbled across your content this week, but I'm a fan now, and I appreciate you taking the time to do the podcast here and share your thoughts. Anything else you'd like to say or promote while I have you?
No, Dave, I can't thank you enough for having me on. It's been great. Yeah, you can follow us on at the New Evangelicals on Instagram, on TikTok. We have a private Facebook community. We have a website, podcast. So yeah, shoot me a DM. My DMs are open. Oh, you can also follow me personally. It's at Tim Whitaker Speaks on Instagram as well.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And Merry Christmas to you this holiday season.
You as well, Dave. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.